Welcome to Beyond the Scale True Healing. If you're new here, thanks for checking us out. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Joan Ifland, author and addictive nutrition expert, is with us today, speaking on what I think is an overlooked root cause of many health issues: processed food addiction. Welcome, Dr. Ifland, and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I wanted to start by saying I've seen influencers on various platforms telling us that there is no bad food, only food. And I can see where they're trying to help, but it also frustrates me. It feels dismissive of food addicted people, or like a denial that it exists, or maybe they don't know that it exists.
Right.
No one would ever say to someone with another addiction that, say, vodka is just a liquid or painkillers are just medicine. So to me, a cookie is not just food. Can you begin with explaining how you realized you were food addicted, what your experience is that led to that discovery and led you to your work now?
Oh, that's a good question. It took me years to, even after I was in recovery. So I started into recovery in 1996, 27 years ago almost. And I just got the sugars and flours out. And just the radical change in my health was so amazing that I adopted this as a career. I had a Stanford MBA. I should have been going back to work after having two children in that corporate world. I had done well there, and I was too sick to go back. My allergies were just constant, and I couldn't take the medication because it gave me a migraine. And I was tired all the time and brain fogged, and I had this constant sinus infection, and I was irritable, raging. I couldn't go back to work. I would have liked to have gone back to work, but my children were 11 and 12 years old. I had quit work when they were born, and I just couldn't go back. My poor husband had to carry the whole load. And then I got off of sugars and flours, and the bloating stopped, and the craving stopped. The brain fog stopped, the fatigue stopped. I was losing weight easily. The sinus infection I'd had really since my sinuses developed as a little kid, that infection went away, and the allergies dropped dramatically. The asthma dropped dramatically. But it was in the third week. All that stuff happened in the first few weeks. When people talk about, oh, people won't get off of processed foods because they want instant gratification. Oh my gosh, this is pretty darn instant. You start getting really big changes within 4 days. No matter how long you've been under the burden of processed foods, your hardwiring is still there. Your factory settings are still there. The original blueprints are still there. You take this enormous burden of processed foods and stressors off your system, and oh my gosh, your body just starts working again. So that's what happened to me in January of 1996, almost 27 years ago. And it was in the third week after giving up processed foods, literally, it was a Thursday, I remember, so it was more like 18 days. I realized that my raging had stopped. And it was since my children were born. I was raised in a very traumatizing, very awful household where people were raging all the time. And if they weren't raging, they were shut down, like doing the silent treatment. It was just devoid of nourishment. And I was determined not to raise my children in that household. But there I would just leave my body and start raging. And I noticed that on January 18th, 1996, my children were 11 and 12 years old. So I'd been battling this raging thing. I'd had personal therapy. I'd had a women's healing group. I'd done my first 12-step group. Nothing was touching it. I would just leave my body and start raging. And I saw on January 18th, 1996, that it had stopped. It was being driven by the sugars and flours that were just pumping adrenaline into my system and then dropping me off. pumping glucose into my system and then dropping me off. So the mood changes, the I'm okay, everything's great, and then I'm raging. These were chemical problems induced by the sugars and flours. So I didn't know anything about addiction. I was in another 12-step group. I had started Food Addicts in Recovery, and I started, but nonetheless, I started. I thought I could just tell people, don't eat this, which millions of people still believe. Oh, you just need to tell them. No, they have an addiction. They need treatment for an addiction. Their brains are doing very specific things that are driving them crazy. So I wrote a book. I had handouts. I gave talks. And I almost got on a national TV show. And the producer said, well, we can't have you because you don't have a degree in your field. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is home of the Union Institute and University, and it's a school specifically for new fields. So I knew all about it. I said to myself, well, I don't have a degree in my field, but I'll go get one. I did. I enrolled at Union, and I spent 3 years from 04 to 07 getting a PhD in addictive nutrition. Now, I will tell you that I graduated from that program still without understanding what an addiction is. So nonetheless, I started writing papers and chapters for other books, and we published the first description of refined food addiction in the academic press. And then I got my doctoral divorce. My husband brought home the divorce papers about 2 years after I finished my degree. And with my divorce settlement, I made one last horrendous, terrific error, which I thought if I started a prepared meal company. I thought I'm just going to give people this clean food. They're going to feel so much better. And then they'll quit eating the bad stuff. And that's like saying to an alcoholic, look, I'm going to deliver this incredibly beautiful water to your house. Just drink the water and stop drinking the alcohol. You're going to feel so good. You won't want that alcohol anymore. No, that doesn't work at all.
Like
You've got to treat the addiction. You've got to train the reward centers to stop pumping out cravings. You've got to train the hyperactive stress center to stop pumping out adrenaline or sending messages to the adrenal glands to pump out adrenaline. And you've got to reactivate your frontal lobe, because these two centers, the addiction and the stress, have been pulling blood flow away from the frontal lobe for your whole life. And so you've got to activate that frontal lobe, because that's your braking system. That's the part of your brain that says, no, thank you, not today. That will make me sick. And it has to battle the addiction, which says, oh, but it's so yummy and it's your birthday and you love that and everybody wants you to have it and she made it just for you. These are two clumps, if you will, of brain cells that are battling each other for control of your behavior. I didn't know that. I spent my whole divorce settlement on that business, and it was the wrong thing to do. So what finally happened was CRC Press came along, and if it's okay, I'll hold up the book. And they said, would you write the textbook for the processed food addiction field? And I said, sure. And right at that time, my dad died. And he left me enough money that I could live on for 3 years, full time, working on that textbook. I did get co-authors. I wrote 70% of it. I tracked out that there are 2,000 studies cited in that book. It's more like a reference book in some ways. And right in the middle of it, I understood what a severe addiction is. I was writing one full chapter. There are 11 signs of addiction, according to the American Psychiatric Association. And I was writing a full chapter on each one of those signs, just organizing the evidence that that behavior exists in overeating. And I got to the end of chapter 6, and I knew everybody did 1, everybody did 2, everybody did 3, everybody did 4, everybody was doing 5. And I got to the end of the 6, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a severe addiction, because that's the criteria. If you're experiencing 6 out of those 11 signs, you have a severe addiction. And I got it. I got it, because then I went to the research and said, oh, what do you do for severe addiction? Oh, that's when you go to residential treatment for 2 years. Oh, well, we're not sending hundreds of millions of people to residential treatment for 2 years. I wrote the rest of the chapters, and there's good evidence that lots and lots of people are experiencing all 11 signs. That's a very severe addiction. And then it's backed up. So it's backed up by new evidence. The researchers are all over this, and the research is not reaching the public. But this one researcher did a study exposing rats to a sugar chocolate combination. They started binging on the first day. So the question is, how much processed foods have Americans been eating for how long? And is that enough that most Americans would have some degree of addiction? And here's the evidence. So a rat could be binging on a sugar and chocolate combination in 1 day. 1 day in a rat life is equal to 1 month in a human life. There are lots of studies that addict rats to sugar, to fat, they even do studies of grocery store foods where they get like the worst and they blend them up and feed them to the rats and see how long it takes for them to get addicted. And it's like 6 months. Sorry, 6 weeks. So 6 weeks is about 52 days. 6 times 7, 42, sorry. And if it's 1 day is a month, that means within a year or 2 or 3 that people would certainly have developed the addiction. For some people, it's going to be 1 month, just like the rats who started binging on the sugar and chocolate combination in 1 day. So 10 days, 11 days, people can pick up this addiction within a year. And when the tobacco industry came in and bought Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods in the mid-1980s and brought their addiction business practices, who did they attack most? Incredibly, it was children. The Kool-Aid products, the Hawaiian Punch products, all the sugary breakfast cereals for children. So this started in the mid-1980s. Tobacco came in with their addiction business model into processed foods. And that was, let's see, so that was well over 30 years ago. Now, I went into the original consumption data at the US Department of Agriculture in 2007 to see, I wanted to see with my own eyes what foods were being consumed at a greater rate throughout the building of the obesity epidemic. And sure enough, it was sugars and flours and high-fat dairy and frozen potatoes. So Americans have been eating excessive amounts of highly addictive substances for well over 30 years, to the point where in 2018, Americans were eating 73% of their food in processed foods.
Yeah.
And it only, as I said, it takes a month or a year or a couple of years to develop the addiction. So that's another huge piece of evidence that most people have this by now.
I can say with almost 100% certainty that I had a severe food addiction by the time I was 4 or 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So in the mid 70s
Mm-hmm.
at that time. Um, yeah, sneaking food and hiding to eat it and not being able to control that urge to do that.
Yeah.
Using it to soothe myself. And it's been a lifelong battle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It really started with Kellogg in the early 1900s. Dr. Kellogg and cornflakes and processed foods. And then the deceptive marketing started immediately. Because at first, these are not foods, they're drugs.
Right.
But he started, oh, these are healthy. And he had his sanitarium, and it was just, the whole business model was set in the early 1900s.
And it's
Well, and
fantastic.
then the other big factors in,
It's fantastic because you reach the kids, so you have these years of addict people in front of you, you know, going.
every cell in that kid's body is developing in an addicted brain.
Yeah.
The addiction genes are turned on in a baby conceived to parents who are eating processed foods. That baby doesn't have a chance.
Yeah.
The mother's eating processed foods during the pregnancy. Now we know in utero, the very first taste cell, the very first smell cell in that baby's brain is being used to detect what is in the amniotic fluid. What is the mother eating? So that by the time that baby is born and the same smells and tastes are in the breast milk, and that when that baby is weaned, what that baby wants is what the mother has been eating. It's a big survival mechanism. So if you live in, if you are born in the wilds of Africa, you want the foods that are available there. But if you're born in Northern Europe, you want the foods that are available there. It's really a neat system. But of course, if the mother's eating processed foods, that baby is learning the addiction. Newborn baby. They went after newborn babies. It's just ruthless, just vile. So it's a very severe addiction. And the other great piece of evidence we have is brain scans. And this is, to me, it's conclusive. If you want to try to discuss this finding, it just sounds silly. And it is that the brains of people who eat processed foods are doing the same thing as the brains of drug addicted, alcohol addicted people. And it is those three main areas: hyperactive reward systems, dopamine, serotonin, opioid, cannabinoid. Hyperactive stress system is called the corticotropin releasing factor system. It's active in drug addicted people and it's active in processed food eating people. And then the hypoactive frontal lobe, like not enough firing going on in the frontal lobe. And when you know that, then you know you do very, very specific things to calm down the reward system. You're looking at cueing, triggering, stimulation, messaging, any reminders that will cause those cells to start releasing floods of cravings. And you're looking to pull the triggering substances away. So it's clear in drug and alcohol recovery, you're taking out the alcohol, you're taking out the drugs, and you're then removing that person from the friends, from the places where they use the drugs. With processed foods, you can do the same thing, except it's 10 times more difficult. So that we can talk about specific addictive foods. The pathway in the brain that these foods light up is entirely different from the pathway that real foods light up. So the processed foods light up the addiction pathways. Real foods light up the survival pathways, the nourishment pathways.
Can I interrupt you?
So that is,
Excuse me, can I interrupt you just for you to define really what is real food and processed food? Because I think the audience is really interesting of doing the difference of both.
yes. So processed foods, in a just like a real shorthand way, they are foods that don't look like they looked when they were harvested.
Okay.
So you pull a beet out of the ground, it's red or yellow, it's round, it has leaves coming out of it. That's food. But when you process that into beet sugar, that's a drug.
Yes.
When you have a poppy flower, that's a poppy flower, no problem. But when you process that into opium, now you have a drug. It is the processing. It's the processing that concentrates the natural endorphins in the plant. So plants, eating is meant to be pleasurable. It's not just, okay, you have to eat because otherwise you'll die. No, Mother Nature was quite a bit nicer. She said, you're going to eat and you're going to get some endorphin release as well. So it'll be pleasurable. You'll be attracted to it. It's just like sex, oh, I got to go make a baby. No, oh, let's do this because you're getting a big endorphin release from sex. All the survival things have endorphins related to them so that you will do them.
Yeah.
Be in a group. Being in a group releases oxytocin, which regulates your dopamine, because if you were in a group, you would live. The group cooperation is how you got water, food, shelter, protection from predators, and a system to raise your children. So all the things that are related to survival, they have this nice endorphin piece to them. And it's lovely. And it's nice and stable, and it lasts for hours. But when you concentrate those natural endorphins, you take out the fiber, you grind it into a powder, you distill it into a crystal or a syrup, then you've created a drug. Now you've taken this nice plant and now it's over here with a category because it has the power to release lots of euphoria at one time. But those brain cells are not designed to sustain that level of euphoria. And so you have a crash. You go up, but then you don't just come right back down, you come down deep and it hurts. And you remember, oh, all I have to do is go get that and I'll feel better. And that's the addiction.
Yeah.
So what's addictive are sugars, any kind of sugar, any kind of artificial sweetener. For many people, high sugar fruits like tropical fruits and cherries, grapes are, they just lose control over them. A lot of people have had that experience. You're standing over the sink and you're just inhaling a bunch of grapes. Well, that kind of behavior is how you know that can't be in your house because you don't want to be doing that. Gluten. The long name for gluten is gluteomorphine. There's a gluteomorphine in gluten. It's there to make the plant pleasurable to eat. Flour. So plants, carbohydrates have been ground into a powder. They're digested too quickly all at once, and they do create a high. Excessive salt. We have to eat salt. It's an essential electrolyte, but excessive salt has been shown to activate the same pathway as morphine. Dairy has 4 different casomorphines in it. It is a substance that is designed to put a baby cow to sleep. It is a narcotic right out of the cow, raw milk, which is, when drunk by a baby calf, is powerful enough to put that calf to sleep. And here we are, we're concentrating it into cheese and eating it like you concentrate that poppy into opium. And then there's excessive fat. So fat is another essential food. You've got to eat it. But if you eat it in excess, it shows, new research shows that it can activate a cannabinoid reaction, an opiate reaction, and a dopamine reaction. And then caffeine. There are 4 different diagnoses in the mental illness manual for caffeine-related disorders. It's a horribly destructive drug and highly addictive. And then food additives. So these are the tobacco companies now. They learn to extract and concentrate nicotine and put it back into cigarettes. And so heaven only knows what they're extracting and concentrating and putting back into processed foods. So one big rule is, does it still look like it did at the moment of harvest? Because you can't, the only powder that you really can harvest is like saffron. It's just like, if it's a powder, that's not what it looked like when you harvested it. Artificial colorings, all that stuff. If they've had an opportunity to put something, to hide something in the product, there's a good chance they did. So real food is colorful and it's got different shapes and textures, and it does different things in the body, and it's food. But these are drugs now.
Yeah, and it's really important what you explained, because I was thinking in the past that real food was one ingredient food, but in fact it's not that simple. It can have only one ingredient and be already processed, and this is really important to know, to identify. And I know that when I'm eating something that looks like the real stuff, my body is reacting differently than if I'm eating something that is powdered or just the shape changed. I really feel the difference.
You can feel it. Yes, you can feel it. But I will say processed foods are numbing. So you might not be able to feel it right away. You might not be able to feel anything. Processed foods are numbing. People are missing their entire lives because they can't feel. They numb out the negative stuff, but they also numb out the positive stuff and everything in between.
Yeah, but to be able to feel it and to identify it, you need to be aware and informed about this. And that is why having you today is so important, because we want to spread the word for people to be careful about all
I'm
this.
so grateful. Yeah. I think we could just wrap up this discussion of processed foods by going back to the tobacco companies. There is an addiction business model. I've published a paper on this. It's the 5 A's. You make it very available. You make it very affordable. You advertise the heck out of it. So that's reminders that are stimulating the reward pathways. You start with a young age, as young as you can get, and you hide addictive substances in the product. So that's the business model. And then step by step, you have this seemingly innocent product. Remember, cigarettes were sold as sexy and relaxing, a health product, and sugary drinks, fun for kids. So it's a deceptive product. It's seemingly innocent, and you just hide as much sugar, fat, salt in that product that you can. And we do have stories about the tobacco industry hiring one particular consultant, Howard Moskowitz, who developed a data technique to maximize the amount of sugar, fat, salt in these processed foods. It's part of the addiction business model. So you're eating these products that are seemingly innocent often enough to establish the addiction. And in step 2, you offer coupons, sales, time-limited offers to get people to eat it often enough to establish the addiction. And then in step 3, you do things like purchase programs where you can send in and get a reward. Well, that reward, say for Kool-Aid, it's a pair of shorts, or it's a wristwatch, or it's a cassette player. Now that child is surrounded by the cueing, the triggering, the stimulation, the reminders, the messaging, and that is they're constantly activating those addictive pathways. And so that child has cravings. Instead of like learning what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be learning as children, their heads are full of cravings. And then then you develop diet-related diseases, learning disorders, etc. So that's the role of the tobacco industry.
Yeah. And thinking about the kids, I really understand your point, and I have a kid, and what will be for you the solution? Because I don't want him to be frustrated by not having some kind of food and eating it outside of the house, like in secret when he's with friends. And so it's really difficult to know how to act with the kids. Do we have to
Yeah.
give them enough for them not to be frustrating, or to remove all this from them for them to be healthy and not addicted? It's really, I don't have a solution. And what are your recommendations about this?
Yes, I love this topic. I love talking about children. I had a therapist when I got off of processed foods. I just wanted to do everything I could to help my children. And she gave me 4 rules for the household, the part of the world that I had control over. And they were, I'm not going to buy it for you. I'm not going to take you to buy it. You may not bring it in the house, and you may not eat it in front of me. So the same types of rules that you would have if you wanted to quit smoking. I'm not going to take you or buy you cigarettes, and you can't smoke in front of me, and you can't smoke in the house. So great. Those are perfect addiction recovery rules. I'm not going to enable you, and I'm not going to allow you to enable me or trigger me. So that already created a safety zone for them. They were already highly motivated to help me in any way because the raging had stopped. The wicked witch had left and this nice person came. So that was really helpful. The other thing I did is I made clean food available to them in big quantities. Whenever they left the house to go to school, they had a clean breakfast, 2 clean snacks, and a clean lunch. And sometimes due to traffic, we would have a long drive home from school. I might pick them up from school and dinner would be in the car so that they wouldn't have to wait till they got home to eat. So that's one big part of the puzzle, is your child always has access to clean foods. Now, the other part of the puzzle is to harness something called pain aversion. So these substances cause pain. They impair cell function. So every cell in the body is hurting when we eat processed foods. And the research on this is just stunning. So what's happening is the cells are getting too much sugar and fat, and they can't keep up with processing it. It's the wrong kind of fat. They can't really make a good membrane out of it. And the debris, so they're processing it, the mitochondria is processing it as fast as it can. And debris from that processing is building up inside the cell. And the cell doesn't have the capacity to clean itself fast enough. And so the cell is literally filling up with trash, and it's not functioning, and it hurts. It hurts. These foods are inflammatory. They suppress immune function. They create fatigue, the sensation of fatigue and brain fog, because the brain is inflamed. They're irritable because their bodies are full of adrenaline, and they're restless, and they can't sit still, and the teacher's yelling at them. And they're filled with anxiety. The reward pathways, the feel-good pathways start wearing out. They're filled with anxiety. And they might have stomach aches, they might have a sore throat, it might be hard to breathe, they might have a headache, they might not be able to pay attention, they might be biting off the heads of their friends and nobody wants to be around them. They might not be able to remember things, they might not be able to learn things, they're struggling with their schoolwork, they're being labeled dumb, all of those things. They might have acne, they might have skin eruptions. These substances they affect every cell in the body. And now, of course, the child is also suffering from malnutrition. The gut isn't really working. Yeah, it's miserable. So unless they know to connect that with processed foods, they will not develop the aversion. But I talked about all the miracles in my life over and over again to these girls, and they got it. They got it. These when they eat that, they feel this way. Now, admittedly, I was providing them with a lot of clean food, so they would have huge stretches of time in which they were only eating clean food, and they could attach how they felt to eating those clean foods. And then they could attach how bad they felt when they gave in. Like, I'll never forget this, but one of my daughters, when she was 14 years old, I picked her up from school one day and she said, "Mom, oh gosh, we went to a pool party today and there were my favorite cookies on the table. I ate 2 of them and now I'm so irritable I can't stand myself." I didn't have to say one word except, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. It's really hard out there, isn't it?" Yeah, she was already in pain. I didn't need to make it any worse. And the cool thing about that story is that the source of control was inside her. I wasn't fighting with her. I wasn't telling her what to do. I was sharing my own stories about the impact on me. And of course, they could see it. You know, Mom wasn't asleep with a headache all the time, and she wasn't raging. And she could actually pay attention because I really threw myself into their activities. Like, they wanted to run for office, you know, I'd sit up with them and make little favors for people to vote for them. I mean, I just threw myself into helping them. So they got this wonderful person available to them, this huge new resource. And it wasn't a battle with them. Now, sometimes I would have to make exceptions. Like, I remember them begging, "Mom, could we have a real birthday cake?" Like, I would make these clean cakes and they wanted a real bakery cake at their birthday party at the house. So I said, "Yes, you can have a real cake. Somebody will have to bring it and they will have to take it home with them. It can't stay in the house." So, you know, you just got to use your judgment. You got to know when something is going to backfire and it's not going to help the child. Yeah, but now here's the other cool thing is once you get a child onto clean food, their gut will repopulate. What does that mean? That means that the bad microorganisms that were being fed by the bad food, the yeast and the microorganisms that break down those bad foods, they die. They start dying. The die-off is part of the reason why there is a withdrawal syndrome. You might get a headache and things like that, and diarrhea, stomach aches, but they do die off. And the liver stops producing the enzymes to break down the bad food. So why is that so cool? It's because when the child puts the food back in, you know, like they go to school, they have these addicted brains, and the teacher is there. "Oh, here's your reward." And she's pushing sugar worse than cocaine on the children. And the child eats it. There's nothing there to break it down. So the full toxicity, the full poison effect of the food will reach the brain. And it will hurt. And it won't take long, 20 minutes. So the cool thing about that is that the child is developing a natural pain aversion. It's coming from inside them. It's coming from the survival parts of the brain. and they will just develop a natural, no, I don't think so. I've got something in my bag. My mom made me something. I'm going to get something out of my bag. Everybody's having candy. I'm going to go get some fruit out of my bag. So it's a combination of making sure that they have all the clean food they could possibly need in that day, and then harnessing the pain aversion, attaching the pain aversion to the food, to the bad food. And then it's coming from inside them, and they don't have like the rebellion. Oh, mom says I can't have this. Well, I'll show her I can get it. I'm going to have it. Yeah. You can do it. You can do it. It takes, so the key to everything I just said is to have a system in the household of food production.
Yeah.
So actually, if your viewers want it, just send me an email and ask me for like the food rotation videos or the food production videos. Actually, we have a new video, how to eliminate a food or behavior. So if you will send me an email and say, Joan said she would send our people the how to eliminate a food or behavior video. That's the best place to start.
Great. You have a food addiction survey as well.
Yes, you
Where
can
people-
go to processedfoodaddiction.com and click on take the self quiz. It's not a diagnosis. It hasn't been validated for that. But it is, I mean, I did validate the prior addiction questions for eating in my doctoral dissertation. But it's just 11 questions, and we can go through them if you want.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So number 1 is unintended use. So you have a plan, you're going to use so much, and then you use more. And people wake up, millions of people wake up every day. Today I'm going to eat good. Today I'm going to eat clean. Today I'm going to go on my diet. Millions of people start their day that way, and they've started their day that way their entire lives. And then by 10 o'clock, they're in front of the vending machine. Oh, I'll start tomorrow. That's unintended use. I'm going to drive straight home, and suddenly there are 3 stops at fast food places. Or I'm just going to eat one out of this box, and next time you look down, it's gone. The whole box is gone. Yeah, unintended use. Number 2 is failure to cut back. So we have 83% of Americans who are overweight or obese. They've tried to cut back, and they can't. We have good research showing that virtually 100% of people who lose weight will have started to regain it within 3 years. Failure to cut back. Almost everybody's experienced that. Number 3 is time spent. It can be time spent inside your head, planning. It can be time spent seeking, going and getting the stuff. Time spent to eat it. Like if you've been on a keto food plan and you've developed addiction to fat, and you're eating, 3 packs of pork rinds and 4 pepperonis and then 2 bags of keto treats, it takes time to eat all that stuff. It takes time to go and get it and hide it around the house and eat it. And then what people don't tend to think about is the time it takes to recover. So you're sleepy afterwards. You're sleeping it off. Your head is on your desk. You can't hold your eyes open. And, all you can do when you get home, because you're so tired and brain fogged, is watch TV. So after a while, your entire life is spent either getting this stuff, using it, craving it, planning for it, or recovering from it. And then spending time dealing with the consequences, going to the doctors, going to the drugstore to get painkillers, or cold medications, dealing with the infections, dealing with the inflammation, dealing with the gut problems, dealing with the diabetes, dealing with the heart inflammation. Heart disease is a big killer in the United States, dealing certainly with the fatigue. And then in the advanced stages, you're dealing with amputations, you're dealing with kidney failure, you have to go to dialysis 3 times a week, and blindness. You know, eventually the diabetes will burst the little microscopic capillaries in the back of the eye. We have epidemics of blindness in the United States, and it's only going to get worse. And diabetes is so ironic because it's a very easy disease to put into full remission if you treat the addiction. So we actually, in our recovery community, we're starting to focus on helping put diseases into remission, creating a structure whereby people can get the food addiction treated, but then also develop other great practices like spirituality, like intuition, like learning what kind of supplements work for you, et cetera, exercise, meditation, all the things that keep us healthy. So if you have a diet-related disease, use it as a springboard to get to be one of the super healthy, one of the super people who are super expert in self-care. Yeah, so that's number 3, time spent. Number 4 is cravings. And we do have research showing that cravings are more prevalent in obese people. So in the United States, as the overweight population becomes obese and the obese population becomes severely obese, there's good evidence that people are developing severe cravings, eventually turning into obsession and compulsion. And then there are 3 behaviors. So the first of the 3 behaviors is failure to fulfill roles. You're too brain fogged and depressed to apply for that promotion. You can't finish school because you can't learn anymore. The addiction has shut down your learning capabilities. Or you can't get down on the floor anymore with your kids, but you're still eating. Then the next one is relationship problems. You're so brain fogged and craving that you can't really focus on another person and figure out what to do for them. You really just want them all to go to bed so that you can get the whatever that's hidden in the laundry room out and eat it before you go to bed. It's very destructive for relationships. All addictions are. And then there's activities given up. And we do know that obese people suffer from isolation. They can't get out anymore. They don't want to get out anymore because they don't want to attract the ridicule about their body shapes. And so they isolate at home with screens. And then there's hazardous use. Eating in the car used to be the biggest distraction to driving. And now it's texting, but it's quite dangerous and people do it. And people with obesity have weight balance problems. Their gait slows, and they have more accidents, but they're still eating. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. They were given an addiction and nobody told them. And then there are the 3 criteria that really happen in the body. So one is use in spite of knowledge of consequences. And as I said, 88% of Americans have what's called a metabolic anomaly. That just means that one of their numbers is out of whack. High triglycerides, cholesterol, glucose, or blood pressure, or they have a high waist to hip ratio. And they're still eating. They're still eating 73% of their food. So use in spite of knowledge of consequences. And then progression, tolerance. You're eating more than you used to. You used to eat that after dinner, and now you're eating it after dinner and after lunch. You used to eat it we were able to drive home from work, and now you're stopping at first 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then you didn't used to go back out after dinner and get more stuff, but now you do. You used to buy one little carton of ice cream once a week, and then it got to be twice a week, and then 3 times a week, and then it got to be 2, and then it got to be half a gallon. So that's progression. And the last one is withdrawal. And we've got really good new evidence for withdrawal from the keto community. They call withdrawal keto flu. We know that it's withdrawal from processed foods, headache, stomach ache, irritability, sometimes even vomiting and diarrhea, and lethargy, depression. So there's a withdrawal syndrome. When you stop using, you get sick. That's withdrawal. And it drives the addiction because people are avoiding withdrawal when they use. So those are the 11 criteria. And you can, if you go to processedfoodaddiction.com and you take the self-quiz, be sure to give us your email address, because you will get an invitation to a free workshop. We have answers. We have an online community that is very specifically engineered to calm those hyperactive craving centers, to calm the hyperactive stress centers, and to stimulate that frontal lobe and bring it back online. It takes a lot of doing because there are many sources of stress. There are many sources of cueing. A lot of them are very deeply internalized now. So you can be triggered by just by a thought. It's something called thought fusion, stress and cravings. Fusing to create thought fusion, where you can't think about food without being stressed, and you can't be stressed without thinking about food. They're so closely intertwined. So yeah, there is an answer now. It's the Addiction Reset community.
It's such a valuable resource, and we'll link to that in the video description.
Thank you.
Also, and thank you. This is just such valuable information, valuable tools.
Listen, you're saving your audience's life. I know it's hard. We started out an hour ago talking about how hard it is to wrap your head around this, and how it took me literally, it wasn't until the middle of the textbook. And also the other thing the textbook showed me was how deeply people are traumatized. They've been gaslighted, they've been denied, they have this horrible reality going on. They've been given the wrong diagnoses. Oh my gosh, I just saw 2 studies, 2. They were like analyses of lots of brain scan studies of people with eating disorder diagnoses. Guess what all the brain scans of these eating disordered people show? Addiction. So yeah, so they're deeply traumatized.
Yeah.
They've had emotionally unstable parents. Yeah, so there's a lot of trauma work to be done, but you can't do the childhood trauma work until the brain is cleared of the substances, because that brain that's being just whipsawed back and forth from these terrible substances, a whole group of them, that creates so much pain in and of itself. If you start opening childhood trauma on top of that, it's just a nightmare for the person. So you got to get the substances out, and then gently, slowly look at the childhood trauma. It's there.
It would be difficult to process any kind of trauma or healing while the brain is so inflamed.
Exactly. Very well said. Very well said. You have this hyperactive stress pathway, chemically hyperactive. It was already hyperactive from childhood, because when you're traumatized, it leaves that pathway, buzzing. What do I need to monitor for? What's a terrible thing that's going to happen next? I need to be very careful. I need to be watching all the time. So it's at a higher kind of vibration. It's already stressed out. And then you put the chemicals on top of that. It's very painful. That's why we have panic disorders, stress disorders. You hear, oh, we live in such a stressful culture. Yes, I mean, commercial entertainment is incredibly stressful. It's horrifying and violent. Yes, but take the chemicals out. You'll see a big change. And as I said earlier, it doesn't take long. You take those chemicals out and the stress level it can start fading away within a week. It's shocking how rapidly the body will go back to functioning the way it's actually engineered to function.
Dr. Ifland, again, we are so grateful for the work that you do and for the time that you spent with us here today. We truly
My
appreciate
pleasure.
all that you have done. We'll be sure to share your book, your community, and all of the places that our viewers can find you. Just such important information that you have for
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To our viewers, thank you for watching. Please take a minute to like, share, comment, and subscribe so that we can help more people find true healing with carnivore and eliminating processed food addiction. Check out the links in the description box below for support, individual coaching, group challenges, and all the ways that you can connect with Claire and me. And until next time, thanks. Bye.